In today's episode, we build the coaming, have a huge pile of wood shavings, and epoxy goes bad.
I am so excited. This is awesome. So the next step we've got to do here is to install this coaming. So this is the cockpit ring, whatever you want to call it. It's the coaming, that's what they're calling it. And obviously this thing doesn't fit. You know, this is the one they sent with the kit. They pre-make this for you. It's just laminated, I don't know, it looks like maybe 3 pieces of 16th inch material laminated up into this shape. Well, I found with mine, I think it had stretched a little bit in shipment or just relaxed, however the wood was. It just seemed like it was a little too wide. So I put some tape on it to pull it in a little bit. You don't have to do that, but I think it's gonna look nicer how it fits into this recess as well too. So I did that. On the front of it, it's just taped at this point. It's not glued together, it's just taped. I guess you could take it and fit it a little bit more if you needed to. I'm not sure what the point of that is yet, but that is how it is. But that gives you a center line at the beginning of this thing, and then you've got to determine where you think the center of the back of it is. You're going to lay it on here where you want it to be, and then just sight down from the front of the boat. You're going to sight down through there and just make sure that you're centered so you're about the same distance in on both sides. Everything looks good. And then what you'll do, once you get it so you think it's level and everybody's happy with it, you'll just put a piece of tape on it, and on both sides, we'll just kind of lock it in, and that'll keep it from rocking back and forth. The other thing I wanted to point out too is right here. Let me grab the camera here, I'll show you. So I put these clamps on in here because this wasn't lining up anymore right here. This, when I fiberglassed the deck, it must have pushed out just a little bit or relaxed again. And so I've got 3 clamps on here now, just kind of holding that together. And I'm just hoping again that that's just going to kind of help that relax and come to that shape. It'll make it a lot easier to put it back together when it's time to do that, if they're fitting better. Otherwise, you're really going to fight with that. So once you've got the coaming in place where you're happy with it, you know, you got it taped down so it's not going to move around on you. You need to scribe onto the deck where this touches. And obviously, it's you got some space here to get through, so you don't want to just eyeball it. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but I'm going to use the cabinet scraper because I got this nice little sharp edge right here, and I can just take this and pull this along here. So kind of like it'll just scratch that surface like that, and that's going to leave a nice little mark all the way around. Sand a few spots here and clean up that edge a little bit. It should fit in there pretty nicely. once you get that fitted in there pretty decent, the next step, actually what I did is I've got it wedged in there, so underneath here, you can see we're just about flush with the bottom of that deck, just sticking up or sticking down a little bit on both sides. So that's pretty even. Front and back is about the same depth as far as being buried into here. So it's probably 2 inches or so. So now what we need to do is we want to cut this to that contour of the deck. So we're just going to go ahead right here. We're going to scribe this all the way around. And I'll take that and cut that off, and then that'll fit exactly to that contour of the boat. So now you can see that that line scribed on there. All right, so with your kit, you should have received a bunch of these. So, got a label right on it what they're for. Coaming lip. These are 1/2 inch by 1/16. There's 12 of them. They're 92 inches long, which is plenty long for what you're gonna do. But basically what we're gonna do is, just like we did the stems, we laminated all those pieces together. We're gonna take all these and we're gonna laminate them together, but we're gonna use this as the form. And so what you'll do is just wrap them on here and glue them up. And on this end where there's too much, there's longer than they need to be, they're gonna run a little extra here. What you'll do is just overlap them. So one sticks out here, one will stick out here. And when those are all done, those will get trimmed and attached at some point later. But first, we're just gonna get them all glued up. It's another case where in the directions it says to use the epoxy, but you can use a Tight Bond 2 wood glue on this just as easily, probably a lot less mess. So that is the method I am going to use. All right, so gluing up all these little strips is a pain. It's one of those things, it's, the glue is a certain amount of set time. You gotta get them all glued up and put together in that time and get them clamped, and it's tough. So one thing I've seen a few other people do on these is just put some blue tape across these and basically turn them into one big sheet of veneer like this. When you flip them over, you can put glue on all these at once using a chip brush, just brush it on, and then you've got them all done, and you just peel them off one at a time and put them back together. So that is what I'm going to do. I probably won't film that just because my hands are going to be covered with glue, along with probably up to my elbows too. Okay, so all those pieces are now clamped up here and glued. Up at the end here, to get a top view down, you gotta use a different type of clamp to get enough pressure in to hold those two parts as they cross over each other and go through there, but that worked out very well. And it really helps to have a helper, so definitely always want a helper with you to do these because your hands are just covered with glue. But it worked really well. Thanks, Carol. you're gonna feel like you removed half the material. Literally you did. You stared out about 1/2 inch boards, glued them together. Of course, they don't glue perfectly. They're a little uneven here and there, so you plane them down. And, 1/8 of an inch off each side. We're down to 1/4. Okay, that's gonna fit on there, something like that. The important thing to do, you're gonna wanna make sure this lines up perfectly as you're gonna take it on and off a couple times as we're working it here. So give yourself a mark. I've got a center line mark on the coaming. I'm gonna continue that mark out here onto that lip, and then I'm gonna clamp it right there. And that's gonna be my index every time I put this back and forth. It's gonna help everything stay on there nicely. Basically right now I'm just kind of doing a real quick test fit just to see how everything's going to go. Anywhere it's not tight up to that coaming, you're gonna want to put a clamp on there just to make sure everything's gonna fit really well. Still have the two pieces overlapping here, and those are gonna get cut as well too. Eventually. I'm gonna show you something here. Kind of see as we look down on these. Right here, you see that gap again. That tends to do that. This wood likes to spring back on you, so again, that's gonna have to be clamped tight. But I'll do that before I make this mark where we cut these two to connect them together. So we're gonna take it right here and we'll just put a line right across there. All right, I've got that first piece cut. I just lined that up with the center line of the boat. When I took that with the pull saw and just cut that off. And I left that just a little bit long. And now what I'm going to do is mark that next piece underneath. And I'm going to mark that a little long as well. And then we'll just keep test fitting it, sanding, test fitting until I get exactly the line that I want so those meet together. So this coaming lip has been the most fiddly thing I've worked on this boat so far. I bet I've had this on and off here 15 times. What you're kind of aiming for is you want to have a 3/4 inch space all the way around the bottom here. So I've got these spacer blocks in there. And getting it to flex down, just stay like that has been difficult. I've got one clamp just holding it down and the other one holding it against the coaming here. But after that 15 or so times taking it off there, I've got it to fit pretty darn well. If you look down on here, you can kind of see it's just a little bit off still. I think as I do my final clamping, I can twist that in there. But I think it's going to work. So I'll probably go ahead and glue that up. It's going to take about twice that many clamps, but at least in theory, it's working. So once that's clamped, this whole coaming is still loose in here. It's not fastened to the deck yet. So that'll be able to be removed. And then we're going to radius these edges after it's glued up. We're going to cut this section off, get that flush, and radius the inside. And then because you can take this whole thing off as a unit now, you'll be able to put a fillet to round off the underside where these two meet. Where that coaming lip and the coaming meet, you want to have that nice and round in there as well. So that will all happen next. I almost forgot too, there's one other thing that I did to help all the fitment on this and try to get that joint tighter, is what I was doing is going along and you can see where I marked a little bit of white right here. I was just taking off some of that material on the inside, making this piece fit with this piece a little bit better and fine-tuning that as we went along. And that goes a long way to getting this joint tight. So I'm probably going to do just a little bit more removal right there, and then that will take out that little bit of gap. Basically, you're just making that whole ring a little bit smaller so it fits tighter. Just got the thickened epoxy put on there and got that coaming lip put in place. What you do is you put on just regular thin regular mixed epoxy first to kind of prime the wood. And then you mix up the thick stuff, kind of like a peanut butter consistency. You can see it right there, how it kind of oozes out. Oozing out is fine. That whole top is going to get cut off there anyway. This whole piece right here will get removed right down to be flush with that lip. So that's all on there. I use the fast setting epoxy on this, so it'll set a little faster, and we can remove it a little faster as well. And where that joint was up there, I just globbed a whole bunch up in there too, into that joint. Again, that'll all just get sanded out, so easily. Lots and lots of clamps. So I took a pretty major step backward. When I mixed up that fast epoxy yesterday, I didn't mix it properly. Well, I did. I mixed it properly. I didn't get the proportions right, apparently, because my epoxy never did set. I let it go for a good 12 hours and nothing happened. I even put some heat on it because, you know, sometimes you can get the stuff to catalyze if you've got it a little warmer. So I got it up to like 80 degrees for a few hours, and it's still just like, it's not really sticky, but it's putty. So it's not working. I'm gonna take it and scrape it all off and redo everything. It's one of those things, you know, when you measure just a little teeny amount of that, because it didn't need very much, the precision has to go way, way up. So instead of volume this time, I'm going to do by weight, and that way I'll make sure I get it exactly right down to the gram. So it's the first time I've ever had epoxy do this to me. I've heard this happens to people, but it's a real pain. Well, it took a couple hours, probably 3 hours of scraping, sanding, all that goo off of all the parts. But I'm back to where I was yesterday. So that's good, I guess. I did figure out what I did wrong. It wasn't off by just a little bit like I thought, like maybe I mixed just a little bit. I was off by a lot. I forgot that the resin and hardener are mixed 2 to 1. So you got 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. I did 1 to 1. Don't make that mistake. Anyway, we're back to gluing this back up again, so should go much better this time. Hey, so it's a miracle. It's the next morning now, and when you mix that stuff right, it hardens up. It's pretty cool. So next thing is get this all unclamped here. I'll take this off because it's still, you know, loose from the boat. And then we'll dress up these edges, get it all sanded up, and then do a fill underneath here. Get that done. And then it's ready to attach. So getting there. Don't forget to save the sawdust. You're going to need that to color your epoxy for your fillets. Okay, so at this stage I've got this thing sanded, got my radius edges here, radius on the inside here. I have not done the bottom yet because that's going to go into the boat I'm going to sand that once it's in there so it gets flushed with the bottom and everything. But at this stage, everything's ready except for here. So on this this inside lip right here, you're going to want to make that a nice smooth fillet. So we're going to mix up some thickened epoxy, and then you just use your finger, to, with the glove on it, and just smooth it in there like you would caulk, and just make a nice fillet in there. So do that now. It's easier while it's out of here and upside down than when it's in the boat and hard to get at underneath there. So that's next. All right, just to give you an idea what I'm doing here for this thickened epoxy edge, I did find I got one of these little stir sticks with a round end on it, so that's what I've been using to shape this with as you go through here, and that works pretty well. And then you can see that the consistency of this stuff is nice and thick. You will have to do a little sanding when you're done, obviously, as you're not going to get this perfect. It's just sticky goo, but you can scrape up a lot of the little spots as you go. I just got to continue around that last little bit. Just to know how much to mix for this, I had this cup about half full, and I did add the sawdust in there to get the color, and then some of that silica thickener to get it to the right consistency. Getting ready to put the coaming in here. So what we're going to do, I put some blue tape down just to catch any drips that go through, just so they're not falling through there. And then I'll go ahead and set this in place, and then we'll just, actually no, before I set it in place, I'm going to put some thickened epoxy along that edge. Then we'll set it in, and then we'll just put a fillet of epoxy all the way around there. Just give that fiberglass another place to turn as it tightens in there. Kind of like the same thing we did up underneath here. I've got that filleted and then sanded out, ready to go. Okay, so I've got that epoxy fillet in there as best I could. And I'll tell you what, it's really difficult to do because your finger just barely fits in that recess. So to get it nice and smooth is almost impossible. You can see a spot right there where I just totally missed. I have to go back over again. But it's on there. Once that gets up to a tacky stage, I'll pull that tape off there too, and that will help for cleanup. But it's going to take some sanding under there for sure to get that smooth before we do the fiberglass.